hello. Today we are talking about how my reading for the month of March is going so far, and it's been kind of a weird reading month because I wrote out the things that I needed to read this month in terms of buddy reads I'd committed to and some of the arcs I wanted to read, challenge stuff, etc. And I decided to prioritize the things I knew were going to take me longer up front, and I actually got through those without an issue. Then I had a week where I pretty much only was doing rereading. The only new thing I read was because the other thing I was working on is that I'm going to be the dungeon master for a new little D&D group that we're getting going. Me and Bethany and Amanda and Leanna and one of my friends are going to do some D&D. So I spent a lot of 1 week planning that campaign, starting off, and then also reading the player's handbook for the first time. I guess I could count this as read. I feel like it's not that I don't think this is legit reading. It's more just I know I haven't absorbed all of it, so should I count it as read? I don't know. Anyway, I spent a week where I didn't read anything new, I think I didn't read anything new for a week aside from this and, the Dungeon Master's handbook and stuff. So kind of an unusual reading month so far for me because I've quote unquote only read, I think 7 or 8 new books so far, but a lot of them were kind of chunkier. And I can tell you that most of them I've been enjoying I was really enjoying them. And I have gotten back into reading new things here in the last day or two. So we'll talk about that as well. But without further ado, we'll get into what I've read, what I'm currently reading, and what I might read next. So in terms of what I've read, how to do this? Maybe we'll just march through this in chronological order. Okay, I read Just Us by Claudia Rankine, which is I would probably describe this as personal essays about race and verging into memoir, but I think personal essays is probably the right way to describe this. And this is definitely a book I would recommend reading in physical form because basically the text is on this page, and then on the opposite page there's usually an image, or sometimes there's footnotes about what is on this page. And I definitely think that this is one that would benefit from being read in its physical form, not as an ebook or as an audiobook. And it's basically just a different kind of personal essay collection than I've ever read. I wouldn't say this was revolutionary in terms of its content, but I thought it was a really well done version of a new take to a personal essay collection. So the form of this was new to me, the content not as much, but I thought it was very thoughtful. I think this would be a good, it says Just Us, an American Conversation. I could see this being a good sort of book club kind of discussion book. Yeah, just a little bit unique to anything I've read before. And I definitely, first thing I've read from this author, and something, I would definitely seek out her work again. I think she is a poetess as well as a nonfiction author. So yeah, this was unique to my reading experience, and I definitely enjoyed it. Then I read an arc of Fugitive Telemetry by Martha Wells, which is the 6th book in the Murderbot Diaries series, which I love. And this was a really, really good entry. And maybe I'll just save most of my thoughts for the end of the month because I'd like to go into a full gush about it. But I think if you are somebody like me who just loves the character of Murderbot, this is going to be a real crowd pleaser because it's Murderbot being a detective, solving a murder mystery, which was so up my alley. They are just so snarky. Oh, it tickled my fancy. It hit all of my pleasure buttons. It was very fun. So I read that one. That comes out, I think, at the end of April. So I've got the physical copy on pre-order, but I read my advanced reader e-copy. So that was very good. Dial A for Auntie, I think also maybe I'll talk about later because it was a unique book. It's very wacky. It's one of the wackiest books I've ever read. It kind of has the tone of maybe a K-drama or a telenovela. It's got that kind of really purposefully over-the-top melodrama happening with it. So again, I think I'm going to call this a surprise and talk about it later in the month, but it was a journey. It was quite a ride. I thought it was going to be more of a rom-com. I think I would describe it more as a wacky family drama with strong thriller and romance elements in there. I don't know. That was an interesting book. And then I polished off Assassin's Quest by Robin Hobb. Whew! I have so many thoughts about this, and I wish I'd written them down right after I read this because I don't think they're as vivid in my mind. This is this trilogy is so interesting in terms of its pacing and how I think it is too long. I think in some objective sense this would have been better. All of these books would have been better if they'd been shorter or apportioned a little bit differently, but the writing is so good that I kind of just forgive that. And I do think it's purposeful because this book is I'd say I gave it the lowest rating of the three. I gave this 3.5 stars. I gave the other two 4 stars, and really Royal Assassin I think was 4, verging on 4.5. It's definitely my favorite of the 3. This one, there are just parts of this book that are so sloggy. Like the opening bit is really good, and I can't get into too much details as to why because it's a spoiler for the ending of Royal Assassin. Royal Assassin has such like a explosive ending to it, and I really like the way she explored that ending in the beginning part of this book. Then we have this period of time, like I'm gonna say from like page, I don't know, like 150 to like 500-ish, where it's such a slog. And my friend Leanna, who I'm supposed to buddy reading this with, I think she's not started actually, but she was like, oh, I've not started, if you want you can just wait and I'll catch up. And I was like, I have to keep going because if I put this down, I will struggle to pick it back up. It is so repetitious and so slow going. I think though that is a part of the thematic content, especially with the actual ending of this book. Like when we find out some of like the origin of what the Forged ones were, I think the whole point of this trilogy is that like history is a circle that repeats itself. Like I think that's the theme. So I think the slowness and repetition is purposeful. I don't think it's just her but the problem is, even though I think thematically that's interesting, as the actual reading experience of it is not enjoyable for that bit. But then we get to this last chunk, and the last chunk of this book is one of my favorite things in the entire trilogy. Like I really liked the actual ending of this a lot. So it's so weird because there's like some 5-star moments in here, and then there's like some 1.5, 2-star. So I landed at a 3.5, but it's such an interesting reading experience. And me and Leanna are gonna read Ship of Magic, which is, I'm looking at it, it's the first in the Live Ship trilogy. We're gonna read that in July, and I'm glad I'm gonna have a break, but I am glad I'm gonna go ahead and get going with the next trilogy because I think this is just such a journey. This trilogy was like a lot to process. I will recommend Sam, I don't think she actually makes YouTube content anymore, but Sam's Nonsense has a really, really good, like detailed series of videos on these books. And I really like what she has to say. And she also, I don't mind spoilers, so she pointed out some kind of foreshadowing that happens in these books for future books. And I really appreciated having that kind of layered into my understanding of what all Robin Hobb is setting up in this trilogy. So I'll try to remember to link those in the description box. But so I enjoyed watching her recaps. I totally get people who don't like this book at all though, because I do think that there are parts of this book where reading it feels a little bit like a punishment from the author. Even though I think it's intentional, it's just not that pleasant. So I get that. But yeah, I'm so glad I read this. This trilogy is really thought-provoking and very thematically dense, I think, and just has really interesting character choices and character arc choices. And when we leave off, there's some very interesting places the story could go. So I will be intrigued to see that. Anyway, this was my biggest thing I knew I needed to get through this month. So I'm glad I prioritized it at the beginning of the month because it's just sort of off my plate. The other big thing that I knew I wanted to get to this month was the upcoming Nora Roberts standalone. So for whatever reason, it always just takes me a little longer to read her standalone thrillers. I think because I just enjoy them and I kind of just want to revel in them. And this was also a 3.5 read that I felt really conflicted about because I actually I felt like this was a return to form for her in terms of actually it being a suspense and there actually being some level of a real romance going on. The last couple of books, it's felt a little bit like that wasn't as much of an interest for her. And this one, actually in its structure, reminds me a lot of The Obsession, which is my all-time favorite one from her, of this kind of ilk. And so structurally and kind of the plot of it, I really liked. The thing that I felt very conflicted about, and this is a really interesting example of authorial intent versus impact. And I say this as a fat woman and somebody who, has thought a lot about sort of the diet industrial complex and fat phobia and things like that. She chooses to make the heroine and actually the heroine's mother be in the sort of fitness influencer profession. And if you read Nora Roberts' books, you know that she does part of the enjoyment is sort of competency porn. Her heroines always have these careers and the careers are always very integrated into the sort of story, and the way she shows the heroines in their careers is very just satisfying. It's women being great at their jobs. And actually usually it's the men too, but it's the the professions in Nora Roberts' books are usually very much a part of the story. That is the case in this book, and while it's clear that she's wanting to have our main character Adrian be more of a wellness fitness influencer, like I think what is communicated to me from sort of the authorial posture is like, this isn't, your mom's, and she actually even contrasts to the heroine's mother and sort of her approach to some of the kind of like exercise and diet stuff. I think it's meant to be more of like a holistic wellness kind of thing, but the actual reality of what's happening is that the heroine's body is constantly being policed by her mother, and then she has learned that behavior and is doing it to people around her. And so it's kind of it's a content warning I would give for this whole book, that there is constantly that coming up. If it'd been more in the background, I think I could have kind of let it go a little bit more, but there's just such a refrain of like, you need to be doing this, or it's something that I think in 2021, a lot of us are trying to move beyond this idea of like, hey, let's just constantly comment on each other's bodies and like constantly make assumptions about each other's health based on what we see of each other's bodies. Like, trying to move beyond that. And so that being such a big part of the book was something that did just keep taking me out of it, and that's what I kept it from me giving it 4 stars. Also, there is a trope in this in terms of the fridging of a female character that did also bother me a little bit. But I say all that, I had pretty much a really good time reading this, but I would definitely give that as a content warning because it's just such a big part of the book. And usually when I have some sort of like representation issue, I express that in deducting a half or a full star. So that's how I landed at 3.5. And then what else? Oh, I read Her Last Holiday by C.L. Taylor, which I really enjoyed. I gave that 4 stars. And yeah, it's just a fun version of a contemporary thriller. It has a dual timeline, but I actually think it's an example of where the dual timeline is not a crutch that is keeping you from noticing that there are structural issues with the mystery. I think that if this had been told in a linear fashion, it would have been still a very interesting story. So to me, it feels more like a choice to increase a certain kind of suspense. So I appreciated that. I would describe this as almost an isolated closed circle mystery. I think I guess it's an isolated closed circle mystery. I think there's a little too much, there's not enough of claustrophobia for me in this for it to feel like a true isolated closed circle mystery. But the setup is that like the main character, well, we have 3 main characters, but one of the main characters is a woman whose sister went missing and is presumed to have committed suicide on a wellness retreat 3 years earlier. The guy who was in charge of the retreat went to prison, he gets out, and she is going to the first retreat he's holding, like it's sort of like a wellness retreat. She's going to the first one he's holding after he gets out of jail, and she's trying to find out what happened to her sister. So we're getting her perspective, we're getting the perspective of the dude who's running the wellness retreat's wife, who we quickly realize is as much, if not more so, in charge of what's going on at these retreats. And then we're also getting the perspective of the sister who went missing on the original retreat. So we're going back in time to see what happened on that one. So I actually really enjoyed this. The sort of like character dynamic resolution to this at the end was not my favorite. But other than that, I actually thought this was a great example of what I tend to like in a thriller. Like, this is more my speed than a lot of domestic thrillers often are. This kind of hit the spot for me a little bit more. So I actually quite enjoyed that one, and I gave it 4 stars. And then I guess I read a couple of sci-fi romances. Don't have a lot to say about those. I will say Royal Alien Mate, I got very distracted because the way that the horns on these aliens are described is that they like come to the back and go down. And I'm like, I don't understand what the purpose of these would be. They talk about using them in battle, but like, how do you, it's not like it's not like a ram where I don't know. That's probably a very dumb thing to be hung up on, but it did take me out of the story. And then in terms of what I'm in progress on, so I once again got Hollowpox out from the library on audio and once again failed to finish it, though I am enjoying it. I got, I think, to the 50-ish% mark, and it is good. I just keep not being in the mood to listen to an audiobook, so it just has been damaging my ability to get through it. But I made more progress, and I think this time I only have to wait like 3 weeks until I get it back from the library. I feel bad that I keep just like not finishing it, but I'm a human, and sometimes I need more time with library books. I'm also technically in progress on The Hammer of Thor, and this is the one where the audiobook I stalled out with it, and I need to just like make it a priority to get back and kind of polish this off, because I was very much enjoying what was going on with the book, but I just didn't like the narrator, and so that was kind of bogging me down. So I'm technically in progress on that and would like to polish it off. And then I've recently started The Souls of Black Folk by W.E.B. Du Bois as my nighttime nonfiction pick, and I'm very much enjoying it, unsurprisingly, because I loved Black Reconstruction in America so much. Also, this edition has a preface from Ibram X. Kendi, Dr. Kendi, who, by by the way, I just have realized is like only a year older than me, which makes me feel like such an utter failure in the light of like what he has done with his life so far, but whatever. I for whatever reason that hadn't clicked with me until recently. I was like, oh, well, okay, cool. I'm just sitting over here making YouTube videos and you're literally like changing the culture in the world. Cool. Anyway, he has a very interesting and very, I think, necessary preface because he provides the historical context in which this was written. And he sort of like reminded me of the critiques I've heard of Du Bois in the past, which gets into a sort of like exceptionalism model of racial acceptance, which is in contrast to Booker T. Washington at the time, who was sort of described as like an accommodationist. So anyway, I appreciated that kind of historical orientation to what's going to, like, why these essays were written when they were, and that was really interesting. So anyway, I haven't made a ton of progress yet, but I'm making my way through this, and this is my nighttime nonfiction pick, and I'm very much enjoying it. What else? Oh, I should say, because we're getting into things that I'm gonna read next, I am gonna read Caressed by Ice, a reread of that, and I did just finish a couple days ago my reread of Visions of Heat. I recorded the podcast for that, for Side Changelings, so I'm very excited that my next reread is Caressed by Ice because it's in my top 3 books probably in the series, so very excited about that. I've got a couple of arcs I need to get through, so I've got 3 left I wanted to get to this month. One is The Soulmate Equation from Christina Lauren. This is a contemporary romance, but I guess technically speculative because its kind of premise is that it is Match.com type thing, but based on your DNA. So like matching you based on DNA compatibility. I think this sounds like a fun premise. I've got The Ivies from my friend Alexa Dunn, which is a YA thriller set at an elite school, which is like very much my jam. Also, I love the cover on this one, so that I am hoping to get to actually in the next week. And then, oh, I had one other arc. What was it? Let's see here. People We Meet on Vacation by Emily Henry, which is, I think, a friends to lovers story, a friends to lovers romance, and I very much enjoyed Beach Read from her last year. I really liked her authorial voice, so I'm hoping that this will be another winner for me there. And then I think everything else I'm gonna play, oh, no, that's not sure. I've got 2 I've got to read, and then everything else I'll play by ear. I've got a buddy, oh, well, do you see that? I'm gonna guess that's courtesy of Miss Marple. Some kitty chewing, but I've got a buddy read at the end of the month with Leanna for Thunderhead by Neil Shusterman. Really enjoyed Scythe last year, and I'm excited to get to the next one because I've heard it's actually the best in the trilogy. And then our book club pick for this month is The Widow of Rose House by Diana Biller. And I've heard fantastic things about this. I think Bethany is the only one who's actually read this yet, and she had sort of a meh response to it, so we'll see how we do. But in theory, I've heard really good things about it. It's got sort of like a cinnamon bun hero who's, I think, like a ghost hunter, and our heroine is sort of like a femme fatale widow. So I don't know, the components of this seem like something I should really love. And I also superficially just love the cover. So I've got to get to those 2. Like I mentioned, I've got Caressed by Ice as my reread I need to get to. And then the only other things I guess I'll mention is, one, I'm trying to make more progress on my 5-star prediction list I had going. So I would like to read The Inheritance Games by Jennifer Lynn Barnes, also so I know if I want to try to request an arc for the sequel. So I've got this, hopefully that will happen. And then I think from the library, I'm gonna get the audio of Ace, which is about asexuality, which both Ashley from Bookish Realm and Bethany have highly recommended to me. So I think I get that in maybe like 2 weeks. So that may also, at least I might get started on that here in March. But yeah, I think that's where I'm at right now with reading. So definitely let me know what you thought about any of the books I talked about. Maybe let me know what you're reading right now if you're enjoying it. And yeah, I think that will do it for me. So if you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, follow me on the social medias if you are so inclined. I have all that information listed in the description box below, and I think that will do it. I hope you're having an absolutely lovely day today, and I will just talk to you soon. Bye!